The Ferrari arrives in Miami, the sixth stop of the 2025 Formula One World Championship, with the awareness that it must take a further step forward in the development of the SF25. The American weekend represents a transitional stage in anticipation of the update package expected for Imola, where the first real changes designed to solve the problems that emerged in the first 2 months of the championship will arrive. Before we start, if you're enjoying the video, please leave a like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any Formula One and Ferrari related news. In Florida, the goal is to maximize the result with both drivers. On paper, the track should suit the SF25 well. Last year, Leclerc made it to the podium and Ferrari nearly clinched the pole position. However, compared to 2024, this year's single-seater has a much narrower setup window, making it harder to keep a clean weekend together. One of the main limitations of the SF25 remains the understeer evident from the tests in Bahrain. This behavior has compromised the drivers' confidence, forcing them to adapt their driving style. Leclerc, who prefers a precise front, seems to have found a better compromise than Hamilton. The pull rod suspension scheme is not directly responsible for the problems. The understeer rather comes from the arrangement of the front suspension arms and their connection to the rear axle, influencing the overall balance of the car. In short, there seems to be a lack of grip at the front that unbalances the load towards the rear and penalizes the single-seater's ability to rotate effectively. Aerodynamically, the issue doesn't involve the floor's initial section, which performs near anticipated levels. The criticality appears linked to ground clearance. The SF25 is forced to fly slightly higher to avoid damage to the skid, which penalizes the production of aerodynamic load, especially at the front, further worsening the balance. By raising the car, the lost load is not evenly distributed between the two axles. The front end suffers more from this deficit, causing an even more pronounced understeer. Not all understeer can be attributed to these factors. For example, Ferrari struggled in the first slow corners at Jeddah due to poor activation of the front tires. In view of Miami, the team has worked intensively on the setup, deciding not to introduce updates to focus on studying the car during the sprint weekend. The double qualifying session will be crucial to collect data and refine the setup, aiming for a more neutral balance and a more responsive front. Vasserlo said an additional step is needed. Indeed, Ferrari needs to eliminate understeer to allow the drivers to push to the maximum. So they are working on suspension changes aimed at better stabilizing the aerodynamic platform of the SF25E. We will see if the first fruits of this work emerge in Miami. In my view, having the sprint race weekend in Miami is a good thing. For Ferrari, because we know that it is very good at preparing the setup before others in the simulator, with more reliable correlations compared to opponents on the virtual, while it struggles more with fine-tuning on the track. However, there are two important issues, which are precisely the height at
ground that.
It needs to be lowered for this weekend in Miami. Let's be clear to go fast, especially in the second sector in the slow-driven part, and also pay attention to the first sector in the fast curves, where it is important to have a not too rigid single-seater, and there we will see a bit more effort from Red Bull in my opinion, but Ferrari has worked a lot on the setup to improve the car also in view of updates that will arrive at Imola, so we can say that the sprint factor is a hidden advantage. Afterwards, there was much discussion about the reasons for this exploit. A credible hypothesis concerns the format of the sprint itself. With only 77 pounds of fuel on board, about a third compared to a normal Grand Prix, the single-seaters can run lower without the risk of disqualification related to excessive consumption of the skid. In fact, in Shanghai in the long Sunday race, Hamilton was disqualified for irregularities on the wear of the bottom. From that moment on, Ferrari had to sacrifice performance, increasing the ground height to avoid new penalties and thus losing aerodynamic load and competitiveness. In a sprint race, this problem is greatly reduced. With lighter loads, the SF25 can operate in a more favorable setup window, maximizing the aerodynamic potential without the constraints imposed by the full load. Fuel. Although the Miami track is very different from Shanghai in terms of layout, asphalt and tires, Saturday morning's race will be an important test to see if Ferrari can regain that competitive edge that emerged in China. Beyond the result, it will also be a valuable indication for the team's technicians. While waiting for the Imola Grand Prix, where important technical innovations are expected, the goal remains to finally widen the operating window of the SF25 even over the full distances of the Grand Prix. And Ferrari will also present itself with a special livery for Miami, dedicated to the partnership with HP and also with a new look. They have already unveiled the new white Ferrari t-shirts. While waiting to officially unveil the special livery for the Miami Grand Prix on Wednesday, April 30th, Ferrari has already shown another novelty for the first Formula One World Championship race in the United States. A new t-shirt dedicated to the Florida weekend. Through a short clip published on their social channels, the Prancing Horse has presented the t-shirt that will be worn by the team members, almost entirely white with red details on the sleeves. A design completely opposite to the traditional one. The caps of Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc also follow the same style, white with small red inserts. This is not the first time Ferrari has proposed a special look for Miami. Already last year, the team had distinguished itself with a particular graphic on single seaters and clothing, even though with different colors. Now all the anticipation is to discover the new livery. We might see a red livery with white details. Ferrari has hinted at this, but the official reveal is set for April 30th, so we'll find out then. And Ferrari continues to work on multiple fronts to improve its performance in Formula One, and one of the most critical aspects remains the optimal management of the tires, a fundamental factor that, if not controlled precisely, can compromise the overall performance of the SF25, especially in the race. As also confirmed by Clerc, Ferrari suffers more than other teams when it finds itself in the wake. The dirty area further penalizes the single-seater already sensitive in the management of the tires. Hence the importance, also emphasized by technical director Loic Serra, of taking decisive action to make the most of the covers. Analyzing the telemetry from Jeddah, it emerges that the two Ferrari drivers adopt different strategies in preparing the last part of the qualifying lap. Leclerc maintains a constant speed between 150 and 124 miles per hour, accelerating sharply before the last turn to stabilize the tire temperature without exceeding the ideal threshold. Hamilton, on the other hand, prefers to alternate accelerations and decelerations using the brake to generate thermal energy. This technique, already seen in Bahrain, however, tends to create fluctuations in the tire temperature and a cross-stress on the surface, preventing the bulk, the layer under the tread, from reaching a uniform temperature. Despite initial difficulties, the understanding of the SF25 is progressively improving. Maranelli technicians have identified a clear development direction, especially with Leclerc, who has already shown progress in managing the car during race weekends. The goal is to try to maintain the right temperature all the way around the qualifying lap, and it's also important to maintain the same temperature for the duration of the race. If on one hand this is a small deficit in qualifying, it can become a huge advantage in tire management, and it's clear that Ferrari aims to find the right balance between performance on the dry lap and consistency in the race. Finding the balance between qualifying and the race will be vital in Miami. With only a single free practice session, there is the closed park, then it's the sprint qualifiers, then there's the sprint race, and finally the closed park reopens before Sunday's race. Well, it will be important to be precise on the setup and adopt a setup first more favorable to a lighter car on the sprint race, and then a setup more favorable for Sunday's race with a heavier car. In my opinion, we could see a weekend similar to that of Shanghai, with a strong Ferrari in the first part of the weekend and a bit weaker on the race. But watch out for McLaren, which is the said favorite in Miami, also because last year we saw a great resurgence of McLaren from Miami onwards, and it's a track that greatly suits the MCL39 for its technical characteristics. But we need to talk now about the Ferrari engine because it has been increased in power. In fact, Manello has homologated the second seasonal power unit for both drivers at Jeddah. A strategic decision linked not to reliability issues, but to the need to have maximum power on a very demanding track, that is, that of Saudi Arabia. The first units replaced will continue to be used in free practice or on less severe circuits like Monaco. As the kilometers pass, in fact, each power unit progressively loses horsepower due to mechanical wear, reducing its overall efficiency. A significant example comes from Oscar Piastri's McLaren, which, despite using a Mercedes power unit with more kilometers than the competition, has still managed to maintain solid performance. Friction and heat are the main enemies of the internal combustion engine. In fact, the wear of pistons, cylinders and crankshafts and the degradation of oils and seals compromise the tolerances and efficiency of the engine over time. Ferrari uses predictive techniques to monitor the health of its power units, similar to other manufacturers. The analysis of lubricants in collaboration with Shell plays a fundamental role, and many have asked why Ferrari has made an early rotation of the engines. In Saudi Arabia, Ferrari, Red Bull, Racing Bulls and Alpine have already mounted the second power unit of the season on both single-seaters, replacing the thermal engine, turbocharger MGUH and motor generator unit, Kinetic, although it may seem like a premature choice given that to respect the limit of 4 units per season, each engine should cover at least 6 GPs, it is a planned rotation. The goal is to use fresh power units on more demanding circuits like Jeddah, where over 70% of the lap is run at full throttle. So this rotation will benefit the Ferrari engines that will then be reused in less stressful races like Monaco. With the technical stability of the power units from 2022 onwards, engine manufacturers can rely on very accurate simulation models to predict the lifespan of each component. Enrico Gualtieri, Ferrari's engine department head, explained that complete units and individual components are selected based on usage history. Mercedes and McLaren have a different strategy, keeping their first power unit except for George Russell, who changed his battery and control unit at Suzuka, likely due to reasons related to the reliability. While Red Bull and Racing Bulls, the Honda-powered teams, had already replaced their battery and control unit in Bahrain to prevent potential issues due to heat and asphalt disconnections, so we can rest easy. There is no alarm at Ferrari regarding the power unit and the engine. Surely Ferrari, having a fresher power unit compared to McLaren, also has a higher top speed as well as less aerodynamic resistance, and this will be an advantage in the Straits of Miami. The same thing also applies in comparison with Mercedes. That's why we often see Ferrari and Red Bull stronger than McLaren and Mercedes on the straights, because there's a mix of aerodynamic resistance. Less drag than Ferrari and Red Bull combined with fresher power units, and there has also been talk of a possible delay in the development of the 2026 engine for Ferrari, but I want to deny it. In fact, some points need to be clarified regarding Ferrari. The team's press sense on the changes to the 2026 regulations is not a negative signal, but rather the testimony of a focused and ambitious approach. The data shows that Paul Ginetti's 2026 project is not just on track, but has surpassed some of the original projections. There are no delays or significant technical problems. The rumors of difficulties are false. Of course, the final judgment will only come with the first track tests in February 2026. However, Ferrari is confident in their work without fear of competition, including Mercedes, which is considered the favorite. In support, an interesting backstory supports this optimistic vision. Among the reasons that led Lewis Hamilton to sign for Ferrari is precisely the trust placed in the technical project of the prancing horse. For 2026, a déjà vu compared to 2012 when the British left McLaren for Mercedes, anticipating the potential of the future turbo-hybrid era. Let me know your opinion on the work Ferrari is doing for Miami. Do you think it will be competitive? As you see, the choice is to have replaced the power unit in Jeddah. Will it do well with the sprint race, the red one? Remember to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to catch all the latest videos on the channel. Every day I keep you updated on all the Formula 1 themed news and specifically Ferrari theme. Check out other related videos from Rasta Tutto. See you next time.